This is Authors Alcove, where writers learn from writers. Readers get the inside scoop, and everyone learns something. An episode comes out every Wednesday where writers share their latest work, every other Tuesday where us writers get taught by such experts as editors, book cover artists, and marketing execs, and beyond. So grab a cup of coffee and let's dive into our next book. Hi, welcome to Authors Alcove. I am your host, Agnes Wolf. Today, I have Rebecca Hartwell. She is the editor of Hart Bound Editing and also the author of the Unlocked series. I've had the privilege of talking to her before. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, so happy to be here.
So, can you just share a little bit about your history and why you have fallen in love with the written word?
Absolutely. So I grew up just reading a ton. I remember going to the library weekly and carrying out armfuls of books. I've still got tons and tons and tons of books in my house. So I've always loved stories. I've enjoyed reading. I've also particularly enjoyed audiobooks. So my own writing definitely has that sort of oral storytelling flavor to it. My dad was a journalist, so I've got that sort of influence in my life. And I don't know if I've admitted this before. I love creating fan fictions in my head. So that was a lot of the storytelling that I was doing for myself for a very long time. And then in 2019, I was in this weird lull between different chapters of my life. And a couple of these fan fictions kind of combined in my head and then veered way off the rails. And at some point I realized, wait a second, I think this has gone so far out of recognition. This is original. Why don't I try writing it down? And wrote my first novel with NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month in 2019.
So you have 3 and a prequel so far, and the series is not complete, correct?
Correct.
Do you mind sharing the titles of especially the first one, and then the most recent one just came out?
Yes. So the core series starts with A Heart of Flame, where we meet Angie and Daniel. The second book in the series is A Soul of Light. And the third book, which came out November 21st, is A Mind of Smoke. And I'm still very excited about that one. It still feels all shiny and new. Oh, and then the prequel novella is A Life of Stone.
And what was the inspiration behind that series?
A whole bunch of stuff. Like I said, it was a several different fanfics that kind of bled together. At this point, I can point to a dozen different other stories that influence different specific aspects. But in particular, I was fresh out of a domestic abuse situation at the time, and a lot of the processing that I was doing does end up coming through in that story and in the themes that are addressed. And a bit like I'm not sure I can really speak to one core inspiration at this point, but I know the goal. From the first time I sat down and was like, I'm going to start writing chapter 1, my goal was to help other people who'd gotten out of situations like that to know what the heck came after getting out. Because I was going through this and I could find all kinds of information about how to prepare for getting out, for how to get out, for how to land, and then crickets. I could not find representation. I could not find advice. I could not find anything to connect with or identify with that really showed what it was like 3 months later, what it was like 6 months or a year or 3 years after the fact. So that was very much my goal. And then it turned into this fun adventure of letting Angie make all of the bad decisions I didn't want to make in my real life and seeing how that played out for her.
So you said it started out as fan fiction. What series or what books did it come from, or movies, maybe even?
Well, so the primary one that I'm like low key still really into is the TV show Once Upon a Time, and my love interest is rather blatantly based on Mr. Gold. So if you're a Robert Carlyle fan, if you liked that character, you should totally read my series.
I love that series. I actually have never ended up finishing it because
I don't either.
So I think I might have to go back and start rewatching. Anyway, okay, so do you mind just giving us a basic plot without spoilers and following Angie? She's the main character in all 4?
Yeah. No. So she's just the main character in the core series.
Okay.
The prequel novella focuses on two characters who do show up back in this main series as side characters, and they are Demetria, there we go, and Nikolaus. And they have a very fun, very short story that plays into ancient curses and borderline immortality, and that the whole wealth dream of, waking up and everything's being cared for and then it goes sour. So but yes, so in Heart of Flame, the first book in the Unlocked series, officially, we meet Angie and Daniel, and they are the protagonists through the series. It's dual POV, so you get more or less balanced between the two of them. And in Heart of Flame, the basic idea behind the plot is that Angie is at rock bottom in many different ways. And Daniel, who is a member of the Magical Society, is assigned to recruit her by saving her life from a fated end to her existence. So he swoops in and grabs her out of her misery, and there's lots of conflict and tension between them. He has all kinds of curses on him, which she does not want to deal with and ends up, mitigating, maybe slightly. Um, so they basically have to then go to this conference, and Daniel is on the inside of this corrupt, ultra wealthy magical community that Angie has been like, she's set herself against. She's a rebel. She's one of the working poor. Like, she has to deal with all these kinds of internal conflicts about, well, okay, this is really nice, but also my morals. And yeah, there's lots of stuff that happens, and she takes issue with the way that this new world hurts its members and does something about it.
You mentioned that healing is a theme in this particular series. What drew you to having that as be a central theme in the series?
I honestly think it was the other way around. I think I started at that concept and the series grew around it. One of the central elements of my world building is that magic comes from trauma. And this was very much me wanting to come up with a scenario for people like me in their late 20s who still want that option of that magical letter in the mail or whatever, who's like, hey, you have magic now. Because, it's been a while since I was 11. And so this concept honestly fed the series more than trying to find a center for the series. And the way that my magic works in the world is that people who experience severe trauma have a catalyzing moment where their aura comes into full existence to where they can use magic. And that obviously just spirals off into all kinds of different world building elements and political elements and self-identity elements and all of this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's built right into the magic. How could I not address it? Everyone who has magic in my world has a deep trauma somewhere in their past.
I can't believe I have not read this book yet. If I would have talked to you like before I actually interviewed you, that I would have had it done and read. And yeah, because I'm very excited to pick this up. Fantasy is my personal favorite. So what makes your fantasy setting? You already told us a little bit about it. What makes your fantasy settings stand apart from others or different than others? And how did it play a part in the character development? Which you kind of already answered a lot of that.
I mean, I already answered the magic system element, so I'll leave that as it is. My world is a modern alternate reality where Italian fascism won sometime in the 20th century, and there's now a global new Roman Empire that's, stomping on everyone's heads. And I took a lot of inspiration from the fall of the original Roman Empire. So there's a lot of those sort of just wealth disparity and corruption and resource issues feeding into this world as it builds up to eventually break. And then the characters are going to have to deal with that.
So do you mind just describing a little bit about Angie's personality and how you had like anything that you, without sharing too many spoilers, like her character arc or anything like that?
Yeah, so Angie is my attempt. I can't honestly say.
And by the way, I like her name.
Thank you. I've had some really mixed reviews of my choice for her name anyway.
Well, my name is Angie, so I
There
like
you
the name.
go. All right. So Angie was my attempt to write a protagonist, a female protagonist specifically, that I could actually identify with, because there's so many tropes, especially in fantasy. You only get so many types of female protagonists doing their stories. So I made her bitter. I made her serious. I won't say angry, but serious. I made her a little bit autistic because I wanted to relate. Um, and I basically did my best to make her not like fall into the tropes of, oh, I'm so ugly but she's actually so pretty, or oh, I'm so clumsy but I can fight really well. Like, I really just wanted to create a real, consistent person who actually reflected and represented her life experiences that I did not see represented often enough.
So do you see yourself in Angie then?
Shamelessly. Yeah, no, I don't really hide the fact that she's my alter ego. So, but again,
Nice.
she's kind of like my shadow self. She gets to make the bad decisions and she doesn't get therapy. All that kind of stuff. So I get to explore the bad decisions I could make and the darker person I could be through Angie.
Nice. So how do Daniel and well, actually, let's describe Daniel first. How would you describe Daniel?
So Daniel is whew, my type. Um, he is gentlemanly, he is refined, he is Scottish, he is younger than he looks, and he is very reserved. I wrote, honestly, I think I had a lot more fun developing and writing and maintaining his character build, just because I have this really clear sense of the different layers of his personality, which is so much fun to write. He talks a lot about his different masks, and he has these different aspects of his personality that he has to portray to different people in his life in different groups just to survive. So he's a real softy once you get through the armor, but boy, that armor is thick.
How do Daniel and Angie play off of each other and help each other grow?
This ties right back into that trauma healing theme really, really strongly. Daniel helps Angie heal just by being a better kind of person than she's had similar relationships with in the past. He tries his best to influence her towards being a little bit more measured, a little bit more careful, and a little bit more introspective. And Angie helps Daniel by pulling him out of that shell. Like, that all of that armor that he's wearing is really not healthy for him, and she does a lot to crack it, which he never enjoys, and then just worm her way in and get to his heart in ways that he's not let anyone get to in a very long time.
Awesome. So how many books do you think will be in the series, or do you not know at this point?
It's currently planned out as 9. It might be 7 or 8, but yeah, somewhere in that area.
So what type of plans do you have for the future for them?
I have so many ideas. So basically, I've created a world that I feel the need to see through to a conclusion, not just the characters, not just their story, but the world. And at the moment, I am absolutely planning that it will be Daniel and Angie seeing it through to the end. But, like I said, I've set up this global Roman Empire. I've set up this, shadow oligarchy of the magical community and all of these different kinds of stuff. And at some point, that's gonna have to break, and the empire is going to fall, and then they have to deal with all of that sort of post-apocalyptic stuff, and then they're going to have to come out the other side, and in between I get to deal with all of these alternate realities that they can go to and maybe eventually start coming into theirs, and all of these creatures that inhabit them, and yeah, all kinds of fun stuff to really make sure that I'm addressing all of the different aspects of this world, because it is so cool and it is so big, and it deserves to have a full arc of its own.
That is so awesome. So I love your creativity. I love your imagination. And I'm very excited to read the books because I have not yet done that. And which is funny because normally when I see a fantasy author on my list, I pick up their book and I hadn't even I just glanced at it. And now I'm super excited. I'm like, why didn't I start reading this before? So anyway, but I have a question for you, especially because I am a fantasy geek. What are some books that you would say are similar or that you drew inspiration from for this novel or the series, excuse me?
I know I should have better answers to this question. Honestly, a lot of my inspiration are more YA. I write very steamy, absolutely 18 plus. But some of my biggest inspirations were things like um C.S. Lewis, all of the Narnia books, and um oh gosh, his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. That trilogy is probably the most influential in me wanting to become a writer. And then Neil Gaiman's American Gods definitely had an influence in there as well.
Have you read the Fourth Wing series? That one's pretty popular right now.
I've definitely been seeing it everywhere. No, I haven't gotten to it yet.
I just started it. I have not gotten very far into it, but I finally gave in and decided to pick it up because I keep hearing it everywhere as well.
That was me with the Court of Thorns and Roses series recently.
I have not picked that one up either, but I keep seeing that one as well. It's one of those that's like, okay, I have all these other ones I need to read. I can't pick that one up, and I know I will eventually pick it up. So anyway, thank you very much. I did want you to just share a little bit about your editing and proofreading services because we had talked previously about that. And I just think that it'd be great for people to know that you are an excellent editor. I can tell by how you describe things. But can you just share a little bit about your company and what you do and who your ideal customer would be?
Absolutely. So I do just developmental editing. So the macro level, looking at the skeleton of the story, the scene, order, structure, arcs, all that kind of stuff. And I do that under the business of Hart Bound Editing, and that is Hart without an E, H-A-R-T, like the female deer. And my ideal client is honestly anyone who has a fantasy, romance, historical, any combination thereof book that they think could have any kind of improvement. And let's face it, that's all of them.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I also just want to ask you the same question I asked you last time, but hopefully you have a different answer. But what is one piece of advice that you would give a yet not published author?
That is a good question. Give me just a second to think here.
It's funny because I'd say majority of people have to stop and think about that particular question. So do not feel bad.
I had one locked and loaded for the last one. Yeah, I think if I could give one piece of advice to an as of yet unpublished author, it would be to know why you love your story. And whatever that particular aspect is, write it down, be very clear, make it as narrow as possible, and then when you're making edits, stay centered on that, because I mean, I'll get feedback from 5 different beta readers, and they're all going to say different things that they liked and didn't like. So knowing the one aspect, be that, okay, I really like that my protagonist has this attitude, or I really like that my magic system has this element. Whatever it is that makes you be in love with your story, write it down, and that is the one thing you get to not compromise.
I love that. I really love that. Thank you very much, Rebecca. I really appreciate you being on. Thank you for taking the time to not be just interviewed once, but twice. Thank
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Author's Alcove. We will be back next week on Wednesday, where we will have a writer share yet another piece of work. Also, every other Tuesday, we do learn from experts such as editors, marketing execs, book cover artists, illustrators, and more. If you are interested in being a guest on our show, feel free to go to authorsalcove.com, go to the podcast tab, and then click on Be a Guest. If you're looking for a healed heart, hop on over to our sister podcast, Strength, Love, and Healing with Authors Alcove. You can find that on Spotify and the Apple Podcast. Thank you so much for listening today. Have a great day.